Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the No Name Podcast. This is episode 6. Thank you so much for clicking in today. Today, we're going to be talking about a variety of issues, but first on the docket, how do we correct correctly? Especially concerning a brother, a fellow Christian, a sister, someone like us in the faith. It's so difficult. It's something that I struggle with on a daily basis. So I'm talking to myself as much as anybody listening. Also, if you've got a question or a comment, nonamepodcast, the number 1 at gmail.com. We'll get to that also later. But first, how to correct correctly. The Bible talks a lot about that. And first, here's an example of how to correct incorrectly. This guy was on YouTube. Here's Pastor Jim.
Hey, sir, quit you talking over here. Hey! Quit you talking. I'm talking to you, sir. Thank you. God bless you. I'm preaching. You're probably the guy that needs to be at the altar tonight. Hope God you're not a Miles Anderson student. I hope if you're going to be a preacher, everybody in the audience talks while you preach. You'll reap what you sow, sir.
And here's Pastor Jim at a separate event.
And where have you been? And I noticed on the calendar I'm supposed to marry y'all. What makes you think I'd marry you? You're one of the sorriest church members I have. You're not worth 15 cents. And you want me to marry you to her? And you want to marry him? And he don't even know where he belongs? And you don't even know where you belong?
Okay, classic example of not rebuking correctly. It's so heartbreaking. There's so many things wrong with just that one or two clips. This man is a pastor. He is speaking from behind a pulpit, except for the time when he got down to pull this young man off his seat to publicly shame him in front of his church family. There's so much wrong with that clip, but at the base of it, like the Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. I think this man, and I'm not going to get into just beating up on him, because we're all guilty of it at one point or another. I'm sure we all are. I know that I am. But how to rebuke brothers and sisters in the faith. Clint Archer on cripplegate.com, a great website with a lot of really helpful and good articles on it, Cripplegate. Clint Archer wrote a piece just a couple days ago that talks about how to correct correctly. And there are a couple different ways you can go about doing this. You can ask yourself different questions, such as, how do I rebuke? And Galatians 6 really makes that clear. You know, Paul's epistles basically dealt with rebuking other Christians and rebuking different churches that he had set up. So to put yourself in the right frame of mind before you begin rebuking, I would recommend reading some of Paul's epistles. And you could start with Galatians 6. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. You could also go back to Jesus' words in the Gospels, talking about how before you pluck that tiny little splinter out of a brother's eye, maybe you should take care of the telephone pole sticking in your own skull. You have to be so careful, because if you do not do it in the spirit of meekness, you are going to drive these people out of the fold and out of the flock. You know, that guy in the second clip was rebuked for not being in church as much as Pastor Jim thought he should. What are you betting that he came back? Pastor Jim and people like Pastor Jim are driving people and pushing people out of the church at a rampant rate. More so than the touchy-feely, fluffy bunny preaching that just come for the blessing and you'll get saved. Look into my eyes. That's all you have to do. Just feel comfortable. They're pushing people out faster than those hypocrites and those wolves in sheep's clothing. We have to be so careful. In the spirit of gentleness and in meekness, we have to rebuke these brothers and sisters. Not only that, but Paul says that he was the chief of sinners, but most people say that he was the greatest apostle. And he did all of the rebuking. So I think another qualifier before you begin rebuking is you have to make sure that you're spiritual. You have to make sure that a telephone pole isn't sticking in your eye before you pull the splinter out of another Christian's. You also have to ask a question, when do you rebuke? Now, the Bible doesn't say anything about how you have to be a regular church attender. It says you can't forsake the assembling of the saints, but that doesn't mean church necessarily. It doesn't say that you have to wear a tie every time you go to church. It doesn't say you have to wear a suit every time you go to church. It's a separate issue, but these are all tertiary issues at best, if they're even issues at all. The only time I'm seeing in the Bible where it's okay to rebuke someone is when there is genuine sin, when there is genuine immorality in the group, in the midst. And we have to be so careful not to become nitpickers. The only time we are allowed and given permission to rebuke is when there is something dearly and desperately wrong going on. And we have to be so careful about that. Now, there is a difference from Christians rebuking Christians to Christians rebuking heathens, those in the world who have not yet accepted Jesus Christ and are not following Jesus Christ. It's totally different. You see, when you're playing basketball on a pickup game outside the church on a Wednesday night and your teammate double dribbles or he travels, you pull him aside and you whisper in his ear gently, "Hey, Bob, you better be careful, because if you do that, we're going to end up getting a foul called on us and you're going to hurt us as a team. So just be careful and try not to do that again." If someone on the other team double dribbles or fouls, "Hey! What'd you do that for? You just fouled. What's wrong with you? You can't do that and get away with it. Come on." You understand the difference here? As Christians, we are on the same team. Pastor Jim was on the same team as the man he was rebuking, as both of the men he was yelling at from the pulpit and making a public mockery of. So there's such a huge difference. When you're talking to someone who is already a Christian, you have to remember the old phrase, what would Jesus do? Jesus called the Pharisees snakes and vipers and whited sepulchres and cups that are filthy on the inside and clean on the outside. Those are potent words, but I think we can all agree that the Pharisees were not following him. They were not in the fold. They were not like-minded and in the faith. When he rebuked the apostles, even when he rebuked the lady at the well, he knew that even if they weren't in the faith and part of the flock right now, they would be, or they could be, with very little pushing at all. And he was much more gentle. If you'd study his tone, if you'd study his vernacular and the way he went about rebuking these people. So we just have to be so careful when you are street preaching, when you are witnessing to someone outside of the faith, someone that does not have their life in order, when someone is not living the way the Bible expressly tells them to live, then by all means bring out the big guns. But when you're talking to a fellow Christian, you have to be so careful. In meekness, in gentleness, doing it for their own good, because you don't want to see a brother continue in sin. That's what I have to say about that. If you have a question or a comment, we'll get to that at the end of the program. It's nonamepodcast at number one at gmail.com. nonamepodcast1@gmail.com. We'll be right back after the break, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for clicking in. Here's Triumphant.
I can't help but smile. Since I've been saved, I realize my life is so much more worthwhile. When I think about my journey growing sweeter every mile, I can't help but smile.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Thank you so much for clicking in. We appreciate that. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page if that's how you found us. If you'd like to have the show emailed to you daily in your inbox, please send us an email to nonamepodcast1@gmail.com, and we'll make sure and put you on that list. We've got some questions that we're going to deal with here, and I'd just like to talk about that for a few minutes. I got a question from someone wondering how we as Christians should talk and view this brand new controversy in the NFL. And as far as being brand new, Colin Kaepernick started it last season, but it has really come full swing after President Trump's speech last week on Friday about how if people don't stand for the national anthem during a football game, you should fire them and just get them off the field. Whether that's true or not, it's neither here nor there for me. It doesn't matter to me, because we as Christians have so much more bigger fish to fry. I wish that whether it's gay marriage, whether it's abortion, whether it's forsaking Israel, whether it's people murmuring and whispering about taking away the church's 501c3 status, their tax-exempt status, where are the people screaming and yelling? And like Paul said when he was walking through Rome, in Romans, he looked at all of the idols and the temples to the idols, and he was stirred. He was angry. He was flat out mad. Where are the Christians that are mad about genuine sin? And I know that not standing for the flag, disrespecting the national anthem, disrespecting us as a country, it's vile, it's disgusting. I understand that. They're protesting inequality. Somebody show me where the African American race is being treated unequal to the white race in America. These people, the NFL is 75% black, and these people are living in houses that I couldn't pay for in 10 lifetimes, and they're driving cars that are worth more than the house that I'm living in now. They're protesting inequality. They're protesting social injustice. It's unjust. Hands up, don't shoot. That didn't happen. We all know that didn't happen. Mike Brown was not a gentle giant in St. Louis. He was trying to take the gun from the cop and shoot him. Makes no sense to me. There is no social injustice. Women are not being treated worse than men. It's not happening. I'm sorry, it's not. And that blows the entire liberal point of view to bits. You can throw it right out the window, but it's not happening. Unless you're a woman and you work for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Then it's happening. Then women get paid 67 cents for every dollar that a man gets paid. It's online. You can look it up. It's fact. Then there's social injustice in the Hillary Clinton campaign, unless you consider the extracurriculars that Bill Clinton will bestow on these women working for his wife. But there is no social injustice. There is no inequality. The African Americans are no longer in chains. There are no separate drinking fountains for African Americans. There are no split churches for women to go on one side and men to go on the other. The only pay difference in the men versus women argument today are because the women would rather not work as garbage collectors. They would rather not work as mechanics. They would rather not work at some of the filthy, dirty, slimy jobs, so they let the men do it. And you know what? That's biblical. That's what men are supposed to do. We're supposed to do the hard work so the women don't have to. And furthermore, men don't want to work at nail salons. They don't want to work at hair salons, unless you're a special kind of guy. But that aside, that's why there's a pay gap. is infuriating to hear about that. It's infuriating to hear that this country that is freer and more equal than any other country in the world is suffering from social injustice. It's aggravating to no end. But that said, it's even more aggravating to know that sin has become so rampant in America. And not only has it become rampant, it's become acceptable. It's become a thing of, it's not bad. It's their lifestyle. It's not something that we can get our noses bent out of joint over. It's just the way they choose to live their life. And just because it's not right for us doesn't mean it's not right for them. Where does it say in the Bible that sin is all a matter of perspective? Where does it say that sin may be wrong for you guys in Thessalonica, but for you in Galatia, this act or this way of thinking or this way of living your life, it's okay? Because it's all a matter of perspective. It's not true, it's not right, it's not accurate, it's not even close to being biblical, and it has to grieve Jesus mightily. And I hope that we as Christians do not lose track of our priorities, and we are just as bent out of shape or more so about sin issues, just as bent out of shape as we are about disrespecting the flag. Because I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, disrespecting the cross is much, 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 much more grievous and much more important than disrespecting the flag. Now, like Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that. Moving on to the next question. Someone wrote in and asked me what country the Antichrist will be coming out of. And I'm so glad this person sent in this email, because I can unequivocally say, without hesitation, without backpedaling, I can give you a solid, sure answer with lots of foundation underneath it. Ready? Here's the answer. What country will the Antichrist come out of? I don't know. And neither does anyone else. There are certain things in prophecy that we as Christians and we as studiers and readers of the Word will never know. Why? Because I think that's the way God wanted it to be. That's because I don't think God wanted us to run around and say, oh, there's Hitler, and the Bible said that he was going to come out of the Third Reich, so he must be the Antichrist. No, just like he didn't want Christians to run around and say, Obama, the people are calling him the Messiah. He must be the Antichrist. No, that wasn't God's plan. Now, I didn't consult Tim LaHaye or Dr. Jerry B. Jenkins about this, but I know they think that he's going to come out of Romania because they've got some sort of a way of figuring out that that's the only country that still has the heritage of the old Roman Empire left. That's the only country. I don't know whether that's true or not. We know the Bible says that the Antichrist is going to come out of the old Roman Empire, but I don't know. If, for all we know, it could be just an analogy. It could be an example of sin. The Roman Empire was totally wrought with sin. It was a mess. It was turning its back on God at every turn, and it may just be a way of saying that the Antichrist is going to come out of a nation or a part of the world where sin is rampant, and frankly, that's everywhere in the world right now. So I don't think we can say for sure, well, we know that the Antichrist is going to come out right there and point our fingers at the map. No, I don't think that's possible, and the point is we have to always be ready, because he could show up on the world stage at any time. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes the 6th episode of the No Name Podcast. We thank you all for clicking in. Don't forget, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, share it on Facebook, tell your friends about it. We would love to hear from you. No Name Podcast, the number 1 at gmail.com. Thank you so much for clicking in and listening today, and we will be back next week.